Today is the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Are you ready for Thanksgiving? Thanksgiving is our traditional holiday reminding us of the importance of thankfulness, to be thankful for family, thankful for God, to be thankful for life. As we grow spiritually, our experience of thankfulness also grows from being a behavior we choose or a feeling or an occasional emotion to eventually becoming a persistent attitude of gratitude. As we spiritually mature, thankfulness becomes an experience of life and an expression and an appreciation for our existence, more so than a feeling. As our connection, our relationship with God matures, you might find that your understanding of reality changes in such a way that you can't help yourself but to be thankful. You wake up in the morning. God, it's good to be alive. No matter what your circumstances might be. But until that point, being thankful may well take some effort on our part. Working on the depth and the expanse of our thankfulness is a spiritual practice and one that's worth the effort. If done persistently, being thankful brings us closer to God and improves our relationship with all of reality, particularly the people around us. In other words, being thankful is something we can do in an intentional way to help us grow. In its purest form, thankfulness is an aspect of love and therefore an aspect of God. Most of us are able to adopt a feeling of thankfulness if we try by repeatedly practicing or meditating on a feeling of thankfulness, of appreciation, of deep gratitude for life. Ideally, that feeling of thankfulness grows like a spiritual fruit. Over time, this experience of thankfulness will impact our relationships with others. People around us will be drawn to us, unconsciously aware that in your presence they are deeply appreciated, no matter who they are. But what if you have a hard time focusing on being thankful at such an expansive and global level? Well, that's okay. If you can't feel general thankfulness for being alive, or thankfulness for God, or thankfulness for Christ, start with something small. All right, this is where the idea of count your blessings comes from. Right? It's a trite saying, count your blessings. But it's powerful. It's a starting point for an effective spiritual practice. You can practice being thankful for specific things as a path towards being thankful for all life. The spiritual practice of being thankful can be done anytime. You can be done when you're in a crowd, when you're waiting in line, taking a walk, being in church. These are all good times to be thankful. And being thankful can be particularly powerful and incredibly transformative for those of us who have historically had an attitude of ungratefulness, of negativity, of pessimism. For many of us, we learn unthankful thought processes early in life and they become a habit. We can spend a lot of mental effort churning through ideas that are overly critical, judgmental, unappreciative. And if we do that, we're almost certainly going to become ungrateful for life itself as a result of those mental habits. Unthankful mental habits damage our relationship with others. It damages our relationship with God, and it damages ourselves, our relationship with ourselves. Instead of being taught to focus on things like thankfulness or love, many of us, perhaps most of us, grow up learning to use our feelings in a judgmental and damaging ways instead. You may remember last week I talked about how judgy we tend to be, we modern Americans, in our thoughts and our word choices, and how it's helpful when we learn to observe and participate in situations without the bad habit of judgment. Understanding our feelings and the feelings of others is part of that process. And I want to dig deeper into that today, into feelings and the importance of our feelings, our emotions. Thankfulness starts that way. But all of our feelings actually can be used as a tool for spiritual growth, because thankfulness happens to be one of the most important feelings we can develop, but it's not the only one. So first, it's helpful or important to have a basic understanding of healthy, helpful feelings versus unhelpful feelings. Which do you have more of? Healthy feelings or unhealthy? Okay, do you know the difference? We as a culture tend to devalue feelings, right? Like they're not important. We tend to look at feelings such as thankfulness as love and think, yeah, that's nice. And in fact, the language we learn for judgment, the number of word choices available to us for criticism, for evaluation, for name calling is far richer than our word choices to describe our feelings. Yet feelings are actually more important and more helpful than judgments in almost all cases. Our feelings are a reflection of our internal being, often in honest and maybe even painful ways sometimes. Despite what we are sometimes told, our feelings are real. Feelings are actually more reliable, more real than our judgments and our evaluations. And when our feelings are not properly expressed, are not properly managed, we pay a steep spiritual price. In our culture, feelings are not seen as valuable, especially for men. Right? I know when I was a kid, I wanted to be a Vulcan like Mr. Spock. And then later, like Data, from Star Trek. No logic, no emotion, all logic. But this is not actually helpful. It's what we strive towards because that's what the culture suggests is more important. But reality is our feelings are a gift. To experience life with deep emotion is part of what it means to experience life as love, as an expression of love. And our feelings are a tool we can use to advance our spiritual maturity and the depth of our relationships. Learning to properly articulate and deal with our feelings and the feelings of those around us opens up new levels of connection in our relationships with each other and our relationship with God. It can actually help make us more thankful and loving people. Unfortunately, our understanding of feelings tends to be so weak that many of us don't know how to accurately express our feelings, don't even know how to put our feelings into words. And therefore, we're not good at understanding other people's feelings either. Spiritual growth requires us to better understand and articulate our feelings both in our own heads and with dealing with others. It also requires that we take responsibility for our own feelings without taking responsibility for everyone else's feelings. And this is actually a big deal. We often take more responsibility for other people's feelings than we do our own. And we don't even realize we're doing it. So much so that the whole idea that we are not responsible for other people's feelings can be a difficult concept to accept. Because early in life, in our families, we learn to take responsibility for other people's feelings. And we learn to blame other people for our feelings. For example, you made me mad. You ever say that? You ever think that? It seems innocent enough, right? But when we say that, we're saying that somebody else is responsible for our anger. Someone other than ourselves. This is dangerous and damaging. You said something, and I reacted by being angry. Right? That's far more accurate and helpful way to think about it. Yeah, you were the trigger, but I was the one that decided to get angry. When we are upset, it's far more helpful to dig for the underlying reasons and recognize that we are responsible for our own anger We are responsible for our own feelings. We are responsible for our own happiness. Why won't you make me happy? That's not articulating our feelings in a way that takes full responsibility. If we think someone else is responsible for our anger, then that suggests there's nothing we can do about it, that my anger is out of my control. It's a similar problem for us not taking responsibility for our own actions. An inability to take responsibility for our feelings and our own actions, if we can't do that, if we fail to take responsibility for our own feelings and actions, that's going to stunt our growth in many ways. Someone else can stimulate our feelings, but we have a choice. We always have a choice. We control our feelings and our actions, not someone else. And part of taking responsibility for our own feelings also means not taking responsibility for other people's feelings. Taking responsibility for other people's feelings does not lead to healthy relationships, even though we're taught it does. It doesn't. As I've already mentioned, do you ever want to make somebody happy? Right? Have you ever felt the need to make somebody else happy? If we assume that other people's happiness is our responsibility, we feel responsible and even compelled to do something about it. But it's actually really difficult and maybe even impossible to make somebody else happy. Many of us can't even make ourselves happy. When we try and take responsibility for other people's happiness, those people can become a burden on us, damaging any possibility for a healthy or loving relationship. We feel guilty, ashamed that we can't make the people who are close enough to us happy because we are taught at a very young age that we should do just that. Women especially grow up being taught that it's up to them to make everyone happy. Am I right, ladies? Some yes, some no's. Depends on how you're raised. Taking responsibility for our own thoughts, feelings, and actions, and not taking responsibility for other people's thoughts, feelings, and actions is a vital step in our emotional and spiritual growth. We can be part of somebody else's happiness, absolutely, right? We can also do things to intentionally hurt people, robbing them of their happiness. And when we do things to hurt others, we are responsible for the impact of our actions in that circumstance, right? But that's not the same thing as being responsible for someone else's feelings, being responsible for someone else's happiness, or being responsible for someone else's anger as a general rule. To be spiritually and emotionally healthy, we must maintain an understanding of the limits of our own responsibility so we're focused on the right stuff. So we're focused on the stuff that we can do something about, that we can actually impact. To act in ways that don't hurt others, while at the same time not thinking that you're responsible for everything somebody else feels. That doesn't mean that we keep our feelings to ourselves or that we don't listen to the feelings of others. The opposite. Sharing our feelings and listening to others is important and helpful when done in loving ways. The difference is understanding the limits of our own responsibility. By doing that, that frees us to listen to other people's feelings without guilt or fear or self-blame, so that we are more present because we're not somehow responsible for that person's feelings. Assuming that we are the cause of someone else's feelings or that someone else is the cause of our feelings leads to missed opportunities for true understanding. Instead of thinking, I will make you happy, I want to make you happy, what if you just instead say, what do you want? What do you need? Doesn't take responsibility, and it offers that, yes, you're there to help. You may not be able to satisfy the person's want or need, and it may not even be your responsibility to satisfy that need. But acting at that level leaves the responsibility for someone else's happiness in their own hands where it belongs. So here's something you might want to try in your own life and conversations you may be having. As you listen to somebody else's feelings, instead of trying to figure out how you need to change to make them happy, instead listen for what they're expressing in terms of needs. And then it might be helpful for you to repeat that back to them. Oh, you're feeling that way because this need isn't being met. Do I have it right? As I mentioned last week, feelings and judgments are often connected to unmet needs. And those needs are also not necessarily our responsibility, but when we are driven by love, we will naturally want to find a way to help, to hook them up to where help can be found, to be able to relate and communicate those unmet needs, assuming they're healthy needs. Do we want to help with unhealthy needs? Right? That's another conversation. Generally, we don't. Right? And all this can come up during any family gathering for a number of reasons. Anyone have any family gatherings coming up, maybe? Not all, but some of us dread getting together with family because someone in the family, we know from past experience, is going to say things that are upsetting to us. They're going to want to hurt our feelings. Someone may even have done this over many years. It might be politics or something more personal that we know is going to trigger us. So it's important for us to be prepared for that before a family gathering or other gathering, to expect that someone is going to be rude. Someone's going to be insensitive, judgmental, or unkind, and to prepare ourselves, to be ready for that. If we know a certain topic is going to set us off, it's up to us to deal with it, to be ready for that. If we know a certain topic is going to be difficult, have a plan. Maybe someone's going to make a comment, looks like maybe you should skip the pie this year. You've gained a lot of weight. Or maybe there's someone who insinuates, you still don't have kids? How selfish of you. Or maybe someone just going, you're a snowflake, or some other political term that's just it's just judgmental. Okay, so first know that when someone makes a rude comment, it says a lot more about them than it does about you. So you don't have to take it personally. Second, have a plan, and generally that plan should include healthy boundaries. Instead of silently seething and lashing out with your own judgments, set boundaries by refusing to get drawn into something that you know is going to upset you. Boundaries can be difficult, but if we're going to enjoy our Thanksgiving, it may be our only rational path forward for some of us. Right? We're not going to solve 20 years of family problems around the Thanksgiving table. But we can make improvements by taking responsibility for our own feelings and refusing to go down unhealthy roads, even when being invited to do so by others. You might want to set those boundaries ahead of time by letting the family know, hey, we're not going to talk about politics this time at this gathering, okay? For example, if someone brings up your weight or the fact that you're still single, plan to respond with something like, I don't want to talk about that right now. I'll get back to you when I figured it out. For example, establishes the boundaries, ends the conversation right there. If body shaming or judgmental talk continues, feel empowered to excuse yourself from that conversation and speak with others. And it's rare, it's hopefully rare, but sometimes you might just need to get up and go home. If that happens, if your feelings are out of control, you don't need to let it deteriorate into a big blow up. right? Just make an excuse. Look, I'm not feeling well. I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye. By learning to identify and deal with our feelings on our own timeline, including recognizing things that trigger us, we need to take responsibility for that. That's our responsibility. By doing that, we open the door to deeper levels of understanding and a deeper experience of life. Thankfulness and love are seeds that grow far more readily in our lives when we take responsibility for our own feelings and our own actions, and we don't take responsibility for others. Learning to be thankful and practicing thankfulness every day, even at difficult family gatherings, is a powerful step towards being a more spiritual life and to living a life of love. Taking responsibility for our feelings and practicing thankfulness persistently brings us closer to God, closer to being an expression of love and compassion as demonstrated by Jesus. So this Thanksgiving especially, be thankful. And wherever the week takes us, let's share the experience of loving gratitude everywhere we go, the best we can.